Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a brief introduction who Dimitris is, because he is one of our co-founders and he is one of the organizers as well. He's my teammate from Forest for Future, the NGO I started in Austria in 2016. And Dimitris is a policy researcher and especially energy policy researcher. So he will give you his brief from that side. Welcome, Dimitris.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Great to be here, and thank you, Vesala. I'm really sorry that I could not be there in person. Like this summer and this September, basically everything I have a moving from one place to another process, and everything that was supposed to go wrong has gone. So I'm giving this presentation digitally, but I'm very happy to be here and to be able to discuss with all of you artists about the getting inside, let's say, the mind of a policymaker during an environmental crisis. Because I really think and I really believe in this interaction, because what artists bring is creativity, and this is definitely what we need. And the convergence of, let's say, these two fields, I think it's vital to start to creating better and more creative and more efficient solutions to basically deal with the environmental problem that we are going. So the main topic here is to understand the policies that are shaping this crisis, and how we have come about to this crisis, and what we can do in terms of response, at least, and how we can also inform policymakers in the best way possible. But first, let's try to make a stakeholder map in this how we would call it, the climatopia. And the stakeholders are four, and they are very. It's not easy to distinguish all the time, but of course, um, we can separate them in four categories. So the first one, as you can see, is the governmental actors. Especially in Europe, you will understand that everything has to pass from public funds, from the legislative bodies. So they are responsible for many of the things that are for many of the issues related to environmental pollution, but also for many of the policies that are being undertaken to address it. At the same time, we have, of course, the private sector, the companies, and this you can understand. It can be agriculture, companies operating in conventional or synthetic fertilizers. It can be energy companies dealing with oil and gas. It can be chemical companies, anyone that uses, regular conventional plastic. It can be any one of these that contributes to what we see as environmental pollution. The third actor we see, for example, here we see the voters. We can see the citizens in general. But what is the most important in this as a stakeholder? We will address them as civil society, because all of us, even though we don't know it, we have the power to organize ourselves. It can be in political structures, but it can be in civil society structures as well, and we can try to formulate the society we want, of course, in peaceful manners. And I'm putting a fourth stakeholder, which you will see later as well, because this is the most important stakeholder, and it is, let's say, Mother Nature. It is the environment. It is the land and the water and the air that we live in. And this, let's say, is a stakeholder of some sorts. It doesn't really have a saying in this whole situation, but it can really impact our lives if we don't tend to its interest as we should. And we see that this is happening. We saw that with heat waves. We saw that with wildfires. We see that even though it doesn't have like a really saying in this whole situation, we do need to take into account the environment as a stakeholder. But let's see, because the most important, many people really, during policy making, they don't really take into consideration the whole system. They only take into consideration their own interests. So let's try to dig a little bit deeper into what these interests are for each stakeholder. Starting with the state, so that we can understand also why this whole situation with the less sustainable companies is taking place. We should start by seeing um, what the state actually wants, and why the countries, why the national governments make these policies. What the government wants is high revenues from taxes, high revenues in general, but most of the revenues come from taxes. And then, of course, a strong government supporting foundation, and of course, stability within its own state, so that there is the notion that there is not going to be any destabilization of the governmental structure. Going further, deeper, going into civil society later, into the citizens, what they want is good living conditions. What does this translate to? Many people see this only as, okay, we have enough money to make the end of the month, but it's not only that. It's also good societal conditions, which means that my rights are respected. I can be who I want. I can have my own preferences. I can live my own life. But it also has to do with the environment. It's very much related to the environment, because I want to breathe fresh air. I want to drink clean water. And you don't, like, many people don't understand this, but they don't understand this while they're in good health. But this is very vital for their health to be in good conditions. So this is also related to, all of this is related to civil society. All of these rights, all of these conditions are related to civil society as an actor. And this also should be taken into account when we are making a policy. Companies, on the other hand, again, the name of the company is is unrelated. I just added this picture as a slide. They also want high revenues for themselves, which translates to high profit if taxation is low, of course. And they also want development, in the sense that they want to expand to other countries. They want to create new, in environment terms, aids to creating new refineries, for example. If it is related to the fossil fuel industry, they want to make a new oil field or gas field in a country in Sub-Saharan Africa. This can be anything, really. Creating a power plant within a country that creates plastics. And also profit, I have to say, it also has to do with the environmental regulations, because if I have to spend more money to have equipment that helps, preserve the environment better, this might result in a lower profit for me. So it's in my interest to have higher profits, so that might stand in my way as well. And of course, the environment, we have, this is connected to civil society again, because it has to do with the environment. But what the environment wants, it's clean air, clean water, and clean land. This has to do with the biodiversity, because otherwise we cannot have the biodiversity that the environment needs, and that the planet needs, in order to be sustained, and in order to not have the consequences that we see now with the climate crisis. Because biodiversity might not seem very relevant to many people, but I had seen a report, for example, that that we see insects outside. We don't really care about them, but if insects start to go extinct, which is expected to start from 2040, so it's very close to now. It's basically the countdown to the end also of the human race. So it's very, very serious. We need to take this into account. Insects, like any kind of flora or fauna within the planet, is very important to be preserved. So this is the interest that we need to respect when we are making policies. So the policymaker thinks of all of these stakeholders, and we have to think how we can balance everything, how we can create a system to make it as profitable as possible and as good as possible for all of the stakeholders, including, of course, our own stakeholders. So, of course, each one wants to do. That's why I wrote for the state, because policymakers are usually on the public sector. But what they think is, how can I make the most of it? But how can I also? But what they should also think is, how can I balance the whole system? How can I keep all beasts? I made this like as all of the actors within the arena. How we can keep them having their interests entertained, at least their basic interests, so that the whole system that I mentioned can continue to function. That is the main question that the policymaker should be able should be thinking every moment, and should pass through their minds. And that is the main question that everyone wants to resolve, so that we can really maintain the environment in the whole in the situation that it is not currently. We wanted before, of course, the levels of climate change, but that, of course, is very difficult to maintain. We want to maintain right now at least the 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, which again is very difficult to do. But one would ask that the two, one would say that the two questions, what should happen and what is happening, are different. So, what is the reality? What is closest? What is happening now? Which one of the two questions is more into the policymaker's mind? And we're going to see that the first question, which is, how can I make the most for my own actor, is happening, because you can see that the reality, there is the only one state act, only one actor or two actors can be happy, because for the fossil fuel industry has recorded more than 7 trillion in subsidies, and more than 219 billion in profit. And we see that oil and gas uptake continues to increase. So there is despite the pledges, despite what we see on television, nothing is happening in the pace that it should happen. So we're still lagging. Still, a lot is needed, despite, of course, the fact that there is a large penetration of renewable energy, and there are some concepts that some projects that are trying to resolve these issues. And when it comes to the environment, because we're talking about environmental pollution, air pollution makes air conditions really not healthy, according to the UN. These are statements made by the UN, that in 99% of the population, 99% of the population does not breathe air that keeps the health standards at an acceptable rate. Up to 5.5 billion people are expected to be exposed to contaminated water. This is also huge, because water, if water is contaminated, it can really reduce the life expectancy in people. And we used to see that, and we still see that in a lot of countries, in a lot of people in Sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia. People with no access to clean water, they cannot expect much in terms of life expectancy, and that translates to that translates also to life not lived, also in terms of quality, but life not lived in general, with all of the ambitions that the person might have, with all of the expectations of each one's life, personally and professionally. This is really expected to have a devastating effect. And land degradation is also connected to living conditions, showing that the citizens are having, let's say, the least of the share of the pie in this whole situation. Because we see that degraded land is already around 27%. Food insecurity is increasing, and we don't see that very much in Europe, but we are expected to see more of that if all of this continues, if the policymakers do not take into consideration these numbers. Because They are, of course, like policies are, of course, currently helping uptake renewable energy. There is, for example, nature restoration legislations that are taking place. There are nature-based solutions that are being pursued, which shows goodwill in terms of the stakeholders, in terms of the policymakers, but it's not enough. And the policymakers need to see this so that we can, like each policymaker, so that they can understand that, going back to the previous slide, we should be thinking more on the third question rather than the second one, in order to not have these numbers. Going further downhill, we have also to think, why do policymakers have this kind of mindset at the moment? And why do companies do what they do? Because it's not really, it's not the fact that they are, let's say, evil and they just want to, like, and the companies or whatnot and the policymakers want to destroy the planet. It's the fact that there is a current vicious cycle of profit within the energy sector that needs major reforms to change. That is not very easy to do, but this is what's happening at the moment. We all know that energy is a very lucrative business, and we all saw that during the energy crisis, because there were high profits. The energy industry made around, as I mentioned, more than $200 billion in profit. And this is something that makes the oil and gas industry very attractive. Another thing that makes it very attractive is that they make a lot of revenue, and the technology that is needed to let's say reduce to extract the resources and to use them is proprietary. And it's very easy right now to at the moment, with the existing resources, it's kind of easy to extract all of this oil and gas, so that translates to much revenue. And for the state, as I mentioned, it is high. It means that it's a lot of profit that can be, a lot of revenue that can be taxed. So there is a lot of money that can be gained from taxes, and then it can be distributed to subsidies, and this creates a vicious cycle that nobody really wants to reduce, because then the subsidies are going to also be given. If you have been to countries like Russia or like Iran, or that they have a very big, or Saudi Arabia, that they have a very big uptake of oil and gas, they provide a lot of subsidies for that, and then this means that the petrol prices are very low. So if I am a citizen, I also gain from that. So I don't see the indirect effects to my health, for example. I only see that I don't pay a lot in the oil and gas industry. I don't pay a lot for my car, for example. I don't pay for my heating. And I am in general in a very good condition in terms of my finances. So there are a lot of stakeholders that are happy. The environment is not happy, but the policymakers are trying to make the most of that. And then there comes the part of the blaming that we're mentioning. If you tax, if you provide high taxation of that high profit, then there will always be a reason to to blame the state for having this high profit in the first place. But if you do not tax them enough, if you are the state, then you're being seen as the lax state towards the energy giants, which is also an issue. And this creates mistrust towards the government. But with regards to the oil and gas industry in general, as you can understand, this is the main problem that really needs to be addressed. How to, let's say, make all of these reforms so that there is further support for renewables, so that these subsidies can actually be redirected to renewables, and try to make them as profitable and even more profitable, which currently is the situation in some cases, than the oil and gas industry. This is a very difficult puzzle to make for the policymakers. So this is the main reason that let's say we are currently stalling, and of course also there is the pressure from the lobbies that are putting pressure within the political regime to not pursue these measures. So that is briefly the whole situation, so that we can understand how a policymaker might be thinking in that sense. So these are some of the things that are very difficult to do, but there are other things, there are other policies that the policymaker can do so that we can reduce at least some of the burden from the environment and from the air. So the change that they can make, for me, the first one is waste management. So this is something that is also an inspiration, potentially also for artists, because some of the waste can be repurposed into also artistic material. And the issue with waste management is that waste accounts for 10% of the emissions, and there are many communities that currently do not even have a waste management policy or strategy. And what they do instead is they burn the solid fuels for heating, for example. This happens a lot. This happens in the Balkans. This happens in Central Asia. I'm sure that you have seen that, especially in rural areas in Serbia, and this is, let's say, the worst thing that can happen, both for the environment, but also some of this is hazardous for the human health. So if it is burned within a closed space, it's very, very hazardous, and it's also responsible for 10% of the emissions and for a lot of the air pollution that we see, especially in rural areas. The policymakers can do something to address that. Here there is the small catch that the education and the training that many policymakers, especially in rural areas, they don't have. So this is also something that initially, for example, artistic materials, they can definitely initially raise awareness. If they, for example, come to a roadshow, they might think like, what is this artistic piece? For example, it shows how you can deal with waste. This can be a spark for them to look it up, to research it, to be more interested. And in this way, 10% of the emissions can be gone. Because it might sound crazy, but for example, if I take a sandwich and I don't like it and I just throw it away, I might think that it's nothing, but it is. It accounts for 10% of the emissions. A second thing that they can do, when we're talking about electrification as a solution to reduce the effect of energy on the pollution, on the environmental pollution, which energy accounts for around 70% of the emissions. So it is a huge contributor to the pollution that we are experiencing. Many, and of course, with the reason, they're going to say that the grid cannot support very much, the electricity grid cannot support very much renewables, because when the sun is shining, every solar panel will give electricity into the grid, and it's going to go down. So what we can do instead is we can make renewable energy communities. A small town, for example, Kopaonik, can make its own community and distribute electricity within their own space with digitalized equipment. All of this, of course, initially it can have some initial capital, it can be expensive, but it will make its own money definitely in the long term. Again, here the issue is how how each one can help these communities understand how they can be empowered. So in that sense, it's also something to raise awareness, to show somehow, again, artistic means can help that people can really take matters into their own hands, and they can help their community thrive through these renewable energy communities. They can also be agroforestry cooperatives, they can be anything, and they can in this way reduce air pollution, reduce environmental pollution that comes from all of these fossil fuels. And they can do that with their own means, if they know how to organize themselves. But the first thing is, again, to put this stimulus within their brains, within their mind. And for me, the last thing I would also put here into youth and women, I would also put artists in general. Further participation of youth and women and artists as well, because this, first of all, youth by themselves, they bring creativity. Artists also do that. Women and people from all groups, they bring diversity. They bring a diversity of opinions, and this can help generate more creative solutions like the ones I mentioned. Renewable energy communities, agroforestry cooperatives, all of this is they are concepts, and there are many projects that can be undertaken. But in order for them to materialize, it's important that each community adapts these concepts into their own context. So in a different way, community is going to be developed in Kopaonik. In a different community, it's going to be developed in Niche. But for this, we need a source, we need a database, we need a bank of creative solutions. And for that, we need as many different opinions, as many different perceptions as possible. And for that, it's very important to have a diversity in our frameworks, participation of youth, creativity, and of course, an artistic perspective. So what I'm proposing with this is for policymakers, for example, to support quotas in local councils, to support the creation of local cooperatives, local governing bodies in energy and in agroforestry, so that they can actually provide the ideas from the inside, from within the local community, and really deliver these solutions to the small community, the rural or urban, and really bring change. So these are three things, despite the fact that there is this conundrum of the fossil fuel industry and the government and the whole situation that's going on. This is a pledge that we can still make change, and that the policymakers, even if they are having these issues, they can still make change at the local level, at the regional level, within cities, within villages, and they can do that starting from tomorrow without any other interference. So this is briefly what I wanted to tell you. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I would be very happy to discuss with you further, either on LinkedIn or on email, or you can hit me up anywhere, and I will be very happy also to respond to questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think the policy itself, I would just switch a little bit more here. Do we have any questions regarding policy, or that I just asking Serbian, sorry. Znate uopće policymakers kako je kod nas reč? Što ja ne znam. Upravljati to je neko... Donosioci odluka, da. Odluka, da, ono zakona, sve što se I'm sorry just to do, because I didn't have the word in Serbian for the policymaker. So I was like, I know everything, like, of course we work together, but I just was like, okay, I don't know the word, maybe also they don't know the word. It's essentially that they have a lot of power over our lives, basically, and how do we approach them? And I think what Dimitris was trying to say is just to inspire them with your art, and to inspire them to think more and to act more.
Was it the question, or I didn't hear well? Sorry.
No, she was saying like, yes, we will try to inspire them with art.
Yeah. It's not the easiest thing. I'm sure. But and that is why nobody so far has really yet, let's say, had the courage or the will to pursue an art colony. But we all have to start from somewhere, and I hope that you deliver some inspiring results, and I'm sure that you will do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dimitris. Thank you. I will log us out of the broadcast now.
Yeah.